Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today it's part 2 for my Read Until I Get a 5-star vlog. If you haven't seen part 1, I will link that up in the cards as well as down in the description. You should check that out if you want to know all of the books I've gone about for this vlog. But I needed to have another introduction for my part 2. In the first vlog, I read 4 books and did not get a 5-star. And so I wanted to break it up so the vlog wasn't super long, even though it was almost an hour last time. Fingers crossed, it won't take me that long this time. We shall see. Hopefully I will get a 5-star relatively quickly, but nevertheless, you guys will get to enjoy the process one way or the other. Keep in mind that as I do these vlogs, I am not filming every single book that I'm reading. I am filming books that I am thinking are going to be 5 stars, so essentially 5-star predictions, and seeing whether or not I'm correct. Now, this is risky because I have run into a couple of books, just a couple, not many, that were 5 stars that I did not put in this vlog, and so I could not put this vlog to an end. But that's the way I've decided to do it, and that's the way I'm going to keep doing it. So yeah, we'll see how it works out for me. The first book that we're going to cover in this vlog is the Rabit Literature Society, and this is actually on my 5-star predictions list in my 5-star predictions series. If you guys haven't checked that out, you should. It's where I essentially talk about my previous 5-star predictions, and then I give you 5 new 5-star predictions that I slowly work through within the next couple of months. And so it's essentially like the vlogs, but just in short form instead of you getting to sit here and listen to me ramble. So if you don't like rambly videos, if you would prefer just short and concise, you might want to check out that series. But in the meantime, I'm going to tell you what I know about this so far. So I am about 1/3 of the way through. I will probably check in with you guys 2 more times in this book, and this book is freaking weird. I will try and describe to you what's going on. In the first chapter of this book, we follow Ella, who is a self-described substitute teacher, but I think that might mean something a little bit different in Finland than it does in the United States. This book is written by a Finnish author, and so I'm sure that there are some cultural things that are a little different. And the reason I think that her job is different than what we would consider a substitute teacher is she's actually grading like essays and stuff by the students. Seems to have like a full contract for like a semester instead of just coming in day by day. So I'm just gonna say that she's a teacher. And so she's a teacher, she wants to be a writer, and has written some things and is trying to get published, essentially. But in the process of grading one of her students' essays, she is having her students write about the book Crime and Punishment. And she originally told her students that she'd read the book, but she then realized that she'd actually been thinking of a different book, and so she was a little, she didn't want to tell them that she hadn't read the book, but she also knows like the general outline. And this essay that she's reading of Crime and Punishment from one of her students has some events in it that she's pretty sure didn't happen in the book. And so she confronts the student about it and is essentially asking him about cheating, asking him about using online resources and things like that. And he's like, no, everything that I wrote in my essay, it's in the book. And he hands her the copy of the book. And she's like, okay, whatever. And she lets him go. And she reads some portions of his book, and these events are in them. And like one involves like a murder with a specific type of murder weapon, and then one involves, I think, the ending of the book in general. And so she calls a professor friend, someone who I think was one of her professors in school, and asks him if these events happened. And he's like, no, because I guess he teaches a class on the book Crime and Punishment, and so he would be kind of like the resource that she could use. And she's like, okay, well, this book does have those events in it. And he's like, well, I would like to see a copy, because he's essentially thinking that it's like another author took liberties with Crime and Punishment and rewrote certain portions. But she's looking at like the publishing details and everything, and it looks like it's the original publishing. And so she's very confused. She ends up going to the library because it's a library book, and she talks to the librarian, and she essentially just makes a report saying that what's in the book is abnormal and doesn't follow the original plot. And the librarian's like, okay, and puts it in a pile with some other books. And she's like, we'll take that one out of circulation. It happens all the time. And Ella's like, oh, what do you mean it happens all the time? Like, I've seen like pages missing, or maybe they're being ripped pages, or things being printed backwards. But she's like, I've never seen where like someone has gone in and specifically removed story lines and added additional elements to the story. And the librarian just acts like it's normal, puts it in a pile, will not give the book back to Ella, because Ella asks if she can keep it because she wants to give it to her professor friend so he can use it as a resource. And she's like, nope, I can't do that. It's out of circulation because it has false information in it or whatever. It's very suspicious. So she essentially waits until the librarian leaves her, and this is all within the first chapter. She waits until the librarian leaves her little table, and she goes and she steals the book, along with some other books that were in that same pile that supposedly had some misprinting involved in them. And a lot of them have weirdly changed details from those stories. So that is one side of things that's happening. We also have, in the background, we have the Rabbitback Literature Society, which is the namesake of the book. So the Rabbitback Literature Society is a society that was created 30 years ago by a famous author named Laura White, who writes children's books. And she created a society of children. I can't remember how old they were, but they were in elementary school, I think. Maybe middle school, and she creates a society of 9 of them and essentially says that she's going to raise them to be authors and they're going to be amazing. And she does it. So she has these authors that are all from this town, and it's kind of an infamous society, secret society that a lot of people want in on. And supposedly there's supposed to be 10 members, but right now there are only 9. And within the last 30 years, no one else has been inducted into the society. It's still very secret. And most of the people, if not all of the people in the society, are relatively successful authors. And so, yeah, that's going on in the background. It's in the same city that Ella is in, where this weird library stuff is happening. And I will tell you, that Ella gets an invitation to be in the society. And that happens very early on in the book. I don't think that's a spoiler. That's probably within the 2nd or 3rd chapter. And I don't know what's going to happen. Things seem very bizarre right now. I'll also say, just because I know I'm probably going to talk about it in the next clip, the author, Laura White, who has created the society, eventually goes missing, and there's some very mysterious circumstances around her disappearance, which literally happens in front of a whole bunch of people. While she's standing there, she disappears, and no one knows what happens. And so that's also an ongoing mystery, along with Ella trying to figure out this society and what's going on within the society as well. Weird things are happening. We'll see. At this point in the game, as far as my prediction of whether or not this is going to be a 5-star, I'm thinking that this is probably going to be in the 4-star realm, even though this was a 5-star prediction for me. It still has potential, depending on how it goes or where it goes, but we'll find out. Hello guys, I am back to talk to you about Rabbitback Literature Society. So I'm not done, and I know I told you guys I was going to check in at, I think I originally checked in at 30%, so I told you I'd check in at 60%, and then when I'm done. Currently I am at page 232, and this is a 340-page book, so I have a little bit more than 100 pages left, and I think I'm done. This book has so many elements that I really love and that I really want to continue with, but I am just dragging myself to pick it up. And there were some things that recently happened, some scenes that recently happened in the book that really bothered me and made me uncomfortable. And I think that's why I've distanced myself from it even more. And so I think this just isn't for me. I definitely don't think it's a 5-star, so for this vlog's purposes, it's not going to matter. This was a 5-star prediction like way back when, which kind of sucks. And that video actually is going up this coming weekend, which will be like way after or way before you guys see this video, because I'm sure this vlog is going to go on for a while just like my other one did. But yeah, so I think I'm just going to DNF it. To give you a little bit of the things that I do love, or that I have loved about the book, there are some discussions in this surrounding the children's stories that the author that went missing has written. And some of the characters that she created in these children's stories are so interesting and creepy. They're kind of like, they're a little bit nicer than like what you would imagine Grimm's Brothers being, but they still have that kind of gothic, bleak, I don't know, kind of like warning tale for children. And I really liked, it was a very small section of the book that I've read so far where they discuss her stories, and I really liked that. I wish, and maybe there is more in the last 100 pages of that, but I don't know that I can go on. There also are some really good discussions within this on kind of sharing your inner self. I can't remember if I mentioned this in the first clip, but, and I won't tell you much, although I could tell you everything I know, and you still wouldn't know what's going on, because I don't know what's going on, which is sad because I really want to. The mystery, and it's really interesting. I want to know what happened to Laura White. Laura White, is that her name? The author in the book, I think it's Laura White. And I want to know what's going on with this literature society, but I don't know. So anyway, within the literature society, they have what's called the game, and it's really a means to get information from each other, somewhat to create their own stories from, because they're all authors. And so they use it, but they use it to get really personal information. And at first, I was enjoying that process of them asking each other things that were really eye-opening, and just stuff in the back of your mind that you don't tell people, like your innermost secrets. And the entire time the authors in the society are playing this game, you also have Ella, our main character, who's become a member of the society, trying to figure out this mystery, which I'm not going to tell you too much about that. For those of you who have read this, the scenes that I'm talking about that I really did not like and are kind of the reason for me DNFing this book are the mirror and the reflection scenes. I'm not going to give too much away about what those scenes are. I will just tell you that the reason they made me uncomfortable is because I feel like it's a man taking advantage of a girl who's gotten herself in over her head, and that's essentially it. That's why it made me uncomfortable, and maybe it's supposed to make me feel uncomfortable. I just don't know why those two scenes were necessary. I felt like the opening up of her mind and sharing some of her past experiences that were gut-wrenching were enough, and I feel like that just stepped over the line for me. So yeah. Anyway, so those two scenes are probably why I am DNFing. Maybe years in the future I will think back on this and want to pick this book back up, because I really want to know the mystery. I want to know what happened to the author. I also want to know what happened to another individual. I'm not going to say who, but in this book. And I want to know what the creepiness surrounding like all the creatures in this town are. I'm intrigued by the mystery, but unfortunately that's not enough to get me past my discomfort at a couple of scenes that I've read so far. So I will be putting this one down. That means that I need to pick another book up. And so I am going to be picking up The Book That Broke the World, which I am really excited about. This book is the sequel to The Book That Wouldn't Burn that I have over here. And The Book That Wouldn't Burn was my second favorite book of 2023. I absolutely loved it. 5-star. I have a 5-star review for it that I will link in the cards and down in the comment or down in the description if you guys are interested in just like a solid review of The Book That Wouldn't Burn, because it was a very complex book. And I am currently on page 101, and this book looks like 370-ish pages. So far I'm really enjoying it. I'm liking my time back with these characters. One of the things I've really appreciated about this book is that at the very beginning, and I won't show you because of spoilers, but at the very beginning of this book, there's a chapter called the things you should know so far, or the story so far, where it actually outlines everything that happens in the first book pretty succinctly, and which is good because the first book was rather complex and there were definitely things that I had forgotten about. And so I really appreciated that about this. And he even says in that little blurb that like he does that because he doesn't want to have characters have to discuss things that they should already know in the second book, just to remind readers of things that have happened. And I appreciate that. So I can't tell you much about what's happening here because it does spoil some of the things that happen in the first book. I'm kind of at a loss of what I want to share. I will tell you that the characters in this are amazing. I love the relationships that were formed in the first book that continue into the second book. And I also have really liked the discussion of knowledge and language being used as a war device. I also really like the library. I mean, the library is just amazing. And I can't give you too many details on that either because I don't want to spoil the first book if you haven't read the first book. But there had just so many discussions being had in these two stories about war and also the capability of living peacefully with people who aren't like you. I'll just leave it at that. I did finish the book that broke the world, so I wanted to pop in and give you guys my thoughts. Unfortunately, this is not a 5-star, so I can't end this vlog with this book, but that's okay. I'll continue on. This was very close. This, other than Night Film, I think that this has probably been my favorite book of this vlogging process so far out of part 1 and part 2. I am going to rate this a 4.75, so it's almost perfect. However, I do think that there are a couple of things in this that kind of irritated me at the end. I was a little frustrated that Mark Lawrence wasn't as creative with something that happens with a specific character. It just kind of feels left off and ignored towards the end of the book. And so that pulled me out of the story a smidge. And then I think that otherwise, I'm trying to think of anything else, any other complaints that I had about this book. I honestly, the fact that it was a lot shorter than the first book didn't bother me. I still thought that it was very well put together. I guess I will say, I'll add that to my critiques. I don't think that the plot was as brilliantly woven together as it was in the first book. The first book, I was so amazed at the end how everything was tied up and how neatly things came together and how, I guess, surprised I was at some of the things that popped up. Whereas in this, I think because I had read the first book and I had kind of known some of the twists and turns of the story, I was kind of expecting certain things in this book. And so maybe it was a fault of my expectations. I do think that the time dynamics in this are a little bit more confusing than they were in the first book. And I'm not going to give you any more details about that because it will ruin the first book for you as well. So I loved this. I do have to say that Mark Lawrence in both of these books, the book that wouldn't burn and the book that broke the world, I don't know how to describe the feeling that I get as I'm reading what he's written here. It's almost like I'm stargazing. It's so, I don't want to call it whimsical, but it puts me in a different frame of mind as I pick these up. It's so calming, but it's also just really beautiful, and I couldn't look away. I absolutely love the writing in both of these books. I do think the first book is better. However, I am still really excited about continuing on with the library series. There is also a character in this, and I'll just say, because you do meet this character in the first book, the character Wentworth is fantastic in this book, and I really enjoyed their perspective. So, or not even their perspective, I enjoyed their tie-in with the story, and yeah, it was really cute. Anyway, so a 4.75 for me, an excellent book. I'm really excited to continue on with the series. But I do have to continue on with this series, with this vlog, because I haven't gotten a 5-star yet. So 2 books down, I am going to be continuing on with Godkiller. Godkiller is a book that I have not read yet. And I know I've heard from multiple people like, what? Have you not picked that book up yet? So I am finally getting to it, and I am 30% of the way in. I unfortunately do not own a copy of this or have a copy from the library. I am just listening to it on audio. And I am pleasantly surprised so far. I don't really know what was keeping me from picking it up originally. I guess it never drew me to pick it up, I guess. I'd heard great things. I hadn't heard anything that put me off of the book by any means. It's just every time it would pop up on Libby, I would borrow it, and then I would let the hold expire, or the loan expire. And so I finally did get to it, and I am really excited about it. I think that it has potential. I don't know that I'm feeling 5-star just yet, but I do really like the world building. If you haven't heard of Godkiller, I don't know if I can even describe what the plot of the book is just yet. We have a character, and I apologize if the names are weird, because I am listening to this on audio because I can't see it visually. They don't stick with me as well as they do if I read things immersively. Kessin, I think, is the main character's name, and she and her family were worshippers of the sea god in their little village. And at the very beginning, the prologue of the book is essentially her family getting murdered and getting sacrificed to the fire god. And she survives the event and becomes a god killer. And so she actually will travel around. It seems like she's like a contract worker. She'll travel around and kill gods in areas where they've grown too powerful, or they've started to ask too many sacrifices or heinous things. And so she takes care of those gods. So she's a really interesting character. We definitely had a bit of a time jump from when her family dies to becoming a god killer, that we don't have a lot of information as far as like how she became a god killer, who she was trained by, how she knows how to do these things that she can do in order to kill gods. And so I'm intrigued with her character, and I hope that we get a little bit more of a character building, because it seems so far that we're not getting a lot of backstory for her. We're just traveling with her. She ends up running into one of the other characters who happens to have a god attached to them in a way that's not heard of. And so she asks the god killer for help. She does not want the god that's with her to be hurt, but she does want to separate them and not have this god bound to them anymore, because they do live in a society or in a kingdom where that's illegal. You're not supposed to be connected to gods in any ways because of some of the things that have happened in the past. So I think that's kind of like the general premise of where the book is heading. I don't know. There's a couple other players that we're getting the perspective of as well, and yeah, I'm feeling that this is going to be a lot bigger than I was expecting, because it's not a very long book. So yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. I will check back in with you guys probably 2 more times. I'll probably check in with you around 70%, and then when I get it done. But fingers crossed that this one will be my 5-star, but we'll see. I've gotten to 70% of Godkiller, and I wanted to pause real quick and talk to you guys. I actually have gotten through this book really quickly. I talked to you yesterday at 30%, and yeah, I got through the other 40% today, and I am still really enjoying it. I don't think it's going to be a 5-star, but I kind of went into it thinking that it was a book I was going to enjoy, but it might not be an all-time favorite. I do really think that the characters and the world building are really intriguing. I don't know how much I want to tell you because I don't want to spoil anything for you guys, but I do think that the gods and the interactions with humans are really interesting to look at. This isn't something that I would say is a new concept as far as gods being linked to humans in some way. Like they gain power from shrines and they gain power from us worshiping them. Actually, it was, I think the Chorus of Gods, or Chorus of Dragons series has some gods and some shrines that, is it Chorus of Dragons? I'm pretty sure it is Chorus of Dragons. I think that it's been a minute since I've read that series, and that series is very vast. But there are a couple of scenes where some of the main characters go in and give like offerings in certain temples to talk to different entities that pertain to, I don't know, specified genres. I'm having a hard time describing it. I know that one of them was like the god of love, and she ended up being one who also watched over like some of the sex workers and things that were also within some of the cities. And I remember that. I can't remember some of the other elements. Anyway, the whole point is this is not a new concept. However, I do like this kind of buildup of war, and we don't get to see that. Like the backstory is given to us in breadcrumbs. And so I did say within my 30% update that I gave you guys that I was wanting some of the backstory on Kissen, or like the backstory from how she got from when she's younger to now as a Godkiller. And you don't really get that. At least we haven't in the 40% I've read since I talked to you guys last. You do have, like, there are a couple of things that she shares about herself, but she is pretty guarded as a character, and I think that fits as far as what we do know about her past and her current profession. So that might be something that comes up in later books. Maybe we get to know her backstory a little bit more in more detail. Maybe we're more focused on the forefront of the story in Godkiller, and the backstories will come later. But anyway, I like I said, I am enjoying myself. I think that the book is really interestingly paced. You have a lot of elements, a lot of really fast-paced. You have some fight scenes that happen, but you also have these really intricate moments between the characters. For instance, there's a moment between Kissen and Nora where Kissen is teaching her how to hunt for food. And I don't want to say that it's slow, but it's intentional with the time that it takes with the characters getting to know each other and the thoughts and feelings that they have as they're going through this process. So yeah, I'm enjoying my time. I'll let you guys know whenever I get finished. Currently, my prediction is that it's going to be a 4.5. And that's excellent. So I think so far I've really enjoyed the book. I think it's an excellent story. I don't get the vibes of a 5-star so far. I finished Godkiller and wanted to pop in and give you guys my final thoughts and tell you what I plan to read next. So overall, my rating is going to be a 4.25, and I think you could kind of tell from the first couple of clips that it wasn't going to be a 5-star, but still a book I really enjoyed. I think one of my favorite things about this book is the author's ability to build up the gods in such a way that you both feel sorry for them, but are also weary of them. I really liked that. So to give you an example, we know in this story that gods need humans. They build their strength based on human sacrifices and understanding and love. So like they need humans. And at the very beginning of the story, you are introduced to Skitty, who is a god who is very cute. And I really enjoyed his character. I think the author made a really good decision whenever she decided to introduce Skitty to you first. And then throughout the book, there are subtle things that are happening with Skitty, but also with the gods in the book and the backstory that we get in the book, where you get to see why certain people have a mistrust and a hatred of gods. Because I think that if you were originally, if the author would have flip-flopped those things, if we would have gotten the mistrust and horrifying things that the gods can potentially do prior to, I think that I would have been less likely to feel for and have empathy for some of the gods that we do run across. And so I'm really impressed with how the author was to build up the gods in the reader's mind. In such a way that we can have empathy, but we can also be scared of them. So that's one of the things I most enjoyed about the storyline. I also think that this story is incredibly detailed for how short it is, and I think it's really accessible for people who potentially have not read a lot of fantasy. So if this is something that interests you, if the storyline, the premise in general is something that you find intriguing, but you haven't read a lot of fantasy, I do think that this is not something, even though it's detailed, I don't think it's overly complex, if that makes sense. Now, there are two elements that I really didn't enjoy about the ending. One of them is definitely a spoiler, so I won't talk about it here, but one of them, I'll just give you a very brief explanation, and I will say that I think that this is something that is just reader preference. I mean, I guess like most book reviews are reader preference, but this particular thing, I've had a conversation with Leandra about it because Leandra read this before me, and I just wanted to see what her opinion was on this particular thing. And if I'm going to have a twist in a book or a surprise in a book, I feel like I need breadcrumbs, not to the point where I would have been able to figure it out by myself, but I need to be able to look back at the story and be like, that makes sense, and not feel like it's a convenience. And I know that in saying that, in doing that, the author does risk the reader figuring something out before they're supposed to. But I feel like when certain culminating events happen and I've had no inkling, like some of the characters weren't even on page for me to find the specific thing out. I think that that's a little cheaty in my head. I want more development. I want more world building, and well, it's not even world building. I just want more character building, I guess, in that sense. And so I felt a little lacking when it came to something specific that happened at the end. And that's all I'm going to say. So overall, I think this is a really good book. Not a 5-star for me. I do plan on continuing the series. Actually, Leandra and I are going to buddy read the series, or buddy read Sunbringer together, which is really funny because we did this kind of in reverse with Emily Wilds, where I read the first book before she did, and then we read the second book together. So we're going to continue our journey with completing series, or continuing series together with the next book in the series. The next book I'm going to bring to you guys, and I think I'm probably going to be doing two. I'm going to be vlogging 2 books at once, and I'll just pop in whenever I can. I don't know how I'm going to separate that in the vlog, if I'm just going to do all of it at once or if I'll go back and forth between the books. But I will be reading Rakesfall and A Short Walk Across a Wide World. The title is so long, I always forget that one. So Rakesfall is a book I really don't know much about, and I just started today, but I'm only like 1% in the book, so I really don't know anything. And I'm kind of confused at the beginning of the book, but I know that this is a sci-fi book. It's a book about 2 people who have somehow had traumatic events bring them together and intertwine their souls. And they travel through time. They apparently can't die, and they can't leave each other. And so I don't know. I don't know what that means. I know when I originally read the synopsis to this, I was just a little intrigued, and it's something, I don't know, it just sounds beautiful, and I want to know how the author pulls it off. So I will be reading this. I'm sorry I can't let you know more than that. I know that the 1% is talking about television in some way, and children being involved in turning the knobs of televisions. Maybe it's not televisions, maybe it's something else. I'm confused with what's going on so far. It sounds like we're watching, it almost gave me like the Truman Show vibes, like we're watching people grow up in a certain way, but I don't know if that's, anyway. The truth is, I don't know. I don't know what I'm reading. So I will let you guys know when I get a little bit further into the book, and I'll update you on my thoughts. And then the Short Walk Across a Wide World, I am going to be buddy reading that with Leandra starting in a couple of days. And this is probably one of my most anticipated reads of the year. It is, it's flaunted as a spin on, not a spin, but like a nod to Addie LaRue, and Addie LaRue is one of my favorite books of all time. And it's about a young girl. She starts at 9, and she has a traumatic event happen, like a fatal traumatic event that she would, well, that's what fatal means. She would die. But somehow she runs from it, and running from it prevents it from killing her. But she learns that if she stays in one place for too long, it will kill her. if she goes back to a place she's already been, it will kill her. And so she just has to be on the move for her entire life. And so it's about her traveling to all these different locations. And I want to read it. And I'm trying really hard not to hype it up in my head, but I think it's going to be fantastic and I can't wait. So those are the 2 books I'm going to bring to you next. I will let you know whenever I've gotten to one point or another with either of them. Hi guys. It's the next day and I'm going to DNF one of the books that I told you about. This is very unexpected because obviously this is a 5-star prediction of mine, but I will be DNFing Rakesfall after 15%. And let me explain why. If I can explain. Also, if you hear raining in the background, it is storming today, so it just is what it is. But I wanted to give you guys this update because I also have another book that I will be reading with you guys that I wanted to tell you about. So first, Rakesfall. I'm very disappointed that this book is not going to work for me, but it's definitely not what I was expecting. So I guess I would let you guys know that the synopsis to this book, and I only read 15%, so I could be wrong in this, but it feels like the synopsis doesn't match what's happening in the story. So I will just tell you about a couple of things that I read, because I told you the last time I talked to you that there was something with television going on. So essentially what's happening in the first part, I think, because I think the book was split into parts. The first part of the book was we were going back and forth between these children's perspectives and then the characters that were in this almost reality TV show that they were watching. It felt very Truman Show-esque, like they were watching these people grow up and their lives on this show. And it also talked about like the obsession with the show and the fact that there were all these different factions of what they believed really happened. And it sounded like it was also fairly political, like in the grander scheme of like the country that they were in. The writing was very confusing. It did take me a while to figure out that we were going back and forth into the perspectives of the children who were watching the show and then the people who were actually actors in the show. And I don't understand the point. We were following 2 characters in the show and their interactions on different episodes. And then the children would talk about like and maybe they weren't children, maybe they were people. I don't know. I thought they were children in the way that they were being described. But they would talk about the reasoning for the actions and the events that occurred in specific episodes. And they talked about how like this show ended abruptly after season 4, it got canceled and it ended with like a huge cliffhanger. And so there were a whole bunch of different schools of thought on that, blah, blah, blah. So at first I was thinking that maybe the 2 characters in the show were going to be the 2 people whose like souls were intertwined and they ended up living in a whole bunch of different lives, because it talks about like when you're in those characters' perspective, there were a couple of like subtle hints about these people having lived before and coming back as like the childhood version of themselves instead of the adult version, because the childhood version is more idolized and more likely to be missed by people than the adult versions. And so anyway, I was thinking that maybe it had started to kind of make sense, and then we completely switched characters to someone who I don't know how they relate. And then we switched characters again. So I went ahead and did some review, like I went and read some reviews on Goodreads just to see like, is this worth continuing? What are other people's opinions on what's going on in the book? And it wasn't promising, I'll say that. There were several really positive reviews, but a lot of the lower rated reviews, like 3-star and below, that I read essentially said that the synopsis does not match what's going on in the book, that that the book feels like a whole bunch of short stories that don't really connect, but are forced to connect in this book. And that is kind of the vibe I was getting from it. I also feel like the writing was overly complicated. Like how the story was told, how the characters were, it was very complicated, and I feel like the story itself shouldn't have been. But yeah, this one's just not for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and DNF it, which sucks because this is a 5-star prediction. But yeah, it's just not for me. I do have exciting news though. I have not started A Short Walk Through a Wide World yet. I plan on starting it today, but I did start another book yesterday because I DNF'd Rakesfall. And I am adding that book into this vlog because it's a potential that it could be my favorite book of the year. I know, high praise. And anyway, so that is The Book of Doors. I talked about this in my July TBR, which I'm sure that you guys have seen by now or by the time this vlog goes up. And the general premise for The Book of Doors is that we have a young woman who works at a bookstore who ends up getting a hold of a book with magical powers. And this book has the power for her to travel wherever she wants. So essentially, if she wants to go to Venice, which is one of the places that she ends up visiting, she can walk through her front door and step out into the sidewalks of Venice. And so that's kind of the main, like the big premise. And then on the side, because of this book that she ends up getting into, there's also some mystery and some kind of nefarious things going on in the world, I believe, where there's like, there are dark forces at play who are trying to get a hold of the book that she's not aware of because she didn't realize that books like this existed. So that's general premise. I am currently 40% into the book, and I know I typically update you guys sooner than this, but I just couldn't stop reading it last night, and so that's why I'm not updating you sooner. And I am still counting it in this vlog. I think it still counts. But I'll update you probably around 80% and then again when I finish the book. But I love this book. I really want to go out and buy it. I'm going to wait until I probably get, although I'm at 40%. I feel like I'm pretty confident that even if I don't love the ending, I'm still going to love the book. So I might go out and buy it. We'll see. It gives me Addie LaRue vibes, as far as the whimsy of the world and the romanticized version of the world and traveling. I'm just a sucker for that. And so you do follow, to give you like more details than I did in the general description, the woman who ends up getting the book originally, so she works at a bookstore. She gets the book from a patron of that bookstore who ends up dying in the bookstore. And this happens at the very, very beginning of the book, like first 5%, if not even the first chapter. She's talking to this man named Mr. Weber, and he's an older man. He's a patron of their bookstore who has been there for years. And him and Cassie, who's the main character, have this really beautiful discussion of aging and of regret, but also love of like your memories, or like being grateful for the memories that you do have. And he talks about like traveling to Rome and all of these. I'm a sucker for Italy as well. And so some of the scenes that are in this book that are traveling to Italy are just phenomenal. But he specifically talks about Rome and walking the cobbled streets. And he tells her that she needs to get out and see the world because it's just an amazing place. And Cassie has kind of this inner dialogue while all of this is happening about Mr. Weber. So Mr. Weber always comes in towards the evening when the coffee shop is getting ready to close within the bookstore. He always gets a coffee and he sits down and he reads his book. And he's always there until she closes the bookshop down, kind of keeping her company. But she talks about how like he's probably lonely and he doesn't seem to have a lot of people in his life at this stage in his life. And so she always makes a point to try and talk to him. And the scene is just very cozy and sweet. Them talking about life together in such different parts of their life. I really liked that. And yeah, I don't know. So anyway, he ends up passing as, like, she's closing down the shop, and so she's like, I'm gonna go put these books in the back and then I'll be back. And he's like, yeah, I'll get up and, you know, I'll start getting ready to go. And she comes back in the room and he just passed on his own. And he leaves her this book that no one else noticed was there. And there's a little note in it that essentially says, I hope this book brings you lots of adventures and, you know, go and see the world. And this is the Book of Doors, that she can travel anywhere. And she doesn't know originally that it does what it does. And she finds out slowly throughout the book. One of the things I've really enjoyed about the story is her, and really a whole bunch of the characters as well, but specifically her. She does like experiments with the book, if that makes sense. She tries to see what works, what doesn't work. Can she go through locked doors? Can she go through doors she's never been to before? Like she does this like scientific process of elimination to try and learn more about this traveling experience. And then the descriptions of her essentially taking like the evenings to go and travel the world are just freaking lovely. And anyway, so it just makes me smile. It makes my heart, it makes me have like a wanderlust. Like I want to go and travel. It makes me want to just pick up everything up right now and go to a different country and wander the streets. But yeah. And then of course we do have the mystery on the background that's really interesting. We have a character named Drummond Fox, who I think is going to become a really large part of the storyline. He apparently was the librarian of the Fox Library. And I don't know how much I want to give you about his character or what that means, but he says he would like to help Cassie and prevent her from getting herself into danger, because obviously having a book that's really powerful can potentially cause people to come after you that you didn't realize existed. And so there's this tension as well in the book that I've really appreciated. But anyway, so like I said, I'm 40% in, and I really am thinking that this is probably gonna be my favorite book of the year. It's just written for me. I just love it. So I will let you guys know when I'm a little bit further along, but I just wanted to pop in. So I DNF'd Rakesfall. I'm continuing with the Book of Doors. And then today I will be starting A Short Walk Through a Wide World, which hopefully will also be a 5-star. So I'll let you guys know my thoughts whenever I get to a certain point in either of the books that I'm going to pick up. I am back with another update for you guys. It's only been a couple of days since I last talked to you, and I have a sad update and I have a good update. So we'll start with the sad. I did start A Short Walk to a Wide World 2 days ago with Leandra, and at the end of the first day, we both kind of hated it. And I was like, I'll give it another day or whatever. The second day, I felt a little bit better, but still not great about the whole thing. And then I continued on into the evening after essentially Leandra decided to DNF it as well. But she ended up stopping at 28%, and I was like, well, I want to get a little bit further. So into that night, so it was yesterday night, I read into about 40%, and then this morning I read until 45%. And I've decided to DNF it as well. So just to talk about a few of my frustrations, the primary frustration that I have is that so much goes unexplained. And this is one of my issues with magical realism in general. I am a fantasy reader. I want world building. I want explanations of things that are happening, or eventually for things to tie back together. I am not okay with this wibbly wobbly, we're just okay with magic existing even though it's not a norm thing. It frustrates me to no end. And this book is really digging in to that magical realism trope, if you want to call it that. So within the first probably 15%, that's what we read the first day, there is a quote in that book, or in the book, that says, and it's talking about her illness, the fact that she gets sick whenever she stays in a certain location. Like, she gets deathly sick when she stays in a location for a certain amount of time. She is talking to the reader, and she says, surviving certain things is easier when you don't understand them. This author is telling the audience that they're not going to explain things, and that things are just going to have to be accepted. And I don't understand. I don't understand why you would create a premise and not give an explanation or reasoning behind the thing that you've created in your book. I don't get it. So that part was really frustrating, and it doesn't get any better. I did think that maybe certain things would be explained, certain connections. There's some scenes at the very beginning of the book that talk about a well, and then also talk about a puzzle ball. And I don't know, and I only got 50% or 45% of the way through the book, so maybe it explains it later on. I don't know what is supposed to be responsible for her illness, or if we are ever going to find out. We don't seem to be really interested in figuring out why, which if something was causing me to almost die every so many days, I'd be fighting until the end to figure out what the hell is the problem. Why do I have this issue? So yeah, I also had a problem with the timeline. This feels like a whole bunch of snapshots of her life, and it's given in a narrative style that I think is the most prevalent book that I know that does this is The Name of the Wind, where you have your main character who is telling their own story through like people within the book. So they're telling the story is being recorded or just listened to throughout the book, and that's what we're doing. But it doesn't really seem like why, I don't understand why we're in her head and why we're not just being told the narrative. With the way things are put together and ordered, it doesn't really make sense to have two different timelines to me. It just makes the plot more confusing. And it's already confusing because one of the things that she has trouble with is time. She doesn't remember how old she is. And so not only are you getting inaccurate information from her in the future because she doesn't know how old she is, you're also getting that same inaccurate information in the past. And so it just seems like everything's a wash. I also, because of the fact that everything is a snapshot, you are not making connections with the characters at all. Also, things just don't make sense. She is a 12-year-old girl at one point on her own in the woods, and she magically knows how to spear a boar. She magically knows how to create a spear that's reliable. She also goes from hunting and being an excellent hunter in the woods to being able to hunt whales, which I'm pretty sure is a completely different thing. And then there are also all these love interests that come into play in the book, and I don't get it. If you are only able to stay in a town for, let's say, less than a week, because I don't want to give you guys too much information about that, but less than a week, you know this person, and the person falls madly in love with you and will do anything they can in their power to help you. Why? Why is this a thing? I don't know. This clearly was just not a book for me. I am very disappointed because this was one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and I'm really glad that I didn't buy it beforehand. So anyway, on to the good news. So I started another book, and I have already updated you guys on the Book of Doors, and I think I got to 40% the last time I talked to you. Well, I am now at 80%, and I can say, I think, guys, we might be able to end the vlog with this book. I have 20% left, so it could still, be lower than a 5-star, but I have had 5-star vibes the entire time I've been reading this book. I did purchase the book. However, I'm going to have to return this because there's I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this, but there's this sticky residue on it. And then look at how, I'm going to have to take it off, but look at how the dust jacket came. It's bent and frayed on the edges. It's crumpled in places. I don't know how much of this you're going to be able to see. But I mean, when I opened the box that the book came in, it was a mess. It was just all over the place. The dust jacket was not in the right place, even on the book. And I'm very frustrated because I don't know. That's, not what you want to do whenever you are really excited for a read that you had. And I was really excited to add this to my collection, but I'm going to have to buy a different version. And these are the end papers for it, but that's okay. I'll find it somewhere else, and hopefully in an actual bookshop that's local, because I ended up buying it from Amazon because I had an Amazon gift card, and I thought, well, the money's going to go to them anyway, and so I might as well buy it from them. But this is why I don't, because they trash the books. Anyway, so On to like the good things about the Book of Doors. So obviously I am loving it because I did want to purchase it for my collection. This book is very much a vibes book. If you are not a vibes reader, I don't know that you will enjoy this. Which I think a lot of people say about Addie LaRue as well. At 80%, we did find out the answer to a really big question in the book. And I had to re-listen to that chapter because I am listening to this on audio. I had to re-listen to that chapter 3 times. Not because it was overly complex, but I just kind of wanted to soak in what had happened, because what is explained is so big. I don't know that I still fully grasp the magnitude of what I just found out, but it's so good. I love it. I love the traveling that we've done with the character. I love the little bits of grief throughout the book. And this is something I have found in my reading tastes recently, is certain books, if they do it correctly, seeing a character grieve someone, whether or not that be, you know, a parent, a grandparent, a friend, and whether or not it's a death of someone or just the loss of a friend, like maybe you guys just part ways. I like being able to see characters struggle with that and grow from that experience. And so we've seen a lot of that in this book. There are a couple of different instances where things like that happen, and grief is a big topic of discussion for our main character. And so I've appreciated those themes as well in this book. I can't wait to reread this and like highlight all of the pieces that I've really enjoyed, because there are so many beautiful lines in this book. But really, it's just a feeling that I get while I'm reading it. This book is such an escape for me. Anytime I'm reading it, I get immersed completely, and I'm only listening on audio. I'm not even immersive reading it, which I just think, I think this speaks very highly to the author, who is also a debut author. And so I am really excited about that as well. But so that's my update so far. I am at 80% and I am getting all the 5-star vibes. So I'm thinking, fingers crossed, guys. Send me your hopes and wishes through the screen that this will be the end of my 5-star vlog. So I will let you know in just a minute. I do have an update for you guys. So I have purchased a non-damaged copy of the Book of Doors. I did return the one that was damaged and found this at my local Barnes & Noble. They actually had a couple of copies on the shelves, which is exciting. And so yeah, so this is the cover. I don't know how well I showed it the last time. So you have like these foiled stars with the foiled pages, and there's the door, and then there's like a spiral staircase, and then a girl falling out of the door. I do understand what this cover is trying to depict after reading the book, and I do like that. However, I think I enjoy the UK cover more than this cover. It's, I don't know how to describe it. It's a different type of blue that I think is a little bit, it shows a little bit more detail, and then it also has like stacks of books on the front cover with like intertwined foil. So I think I do like the UK cover better, but I am still happy nonetheless to have this. It does have the beautiful end pages that I showed you guys whenever I had the damaged version, and it does also have deckled edges, which I don't know that I've ever had a hardback that has deckled edges. So that's an interesting choice, but I don't hate deckled edges. I think that they're fine. So yeah, I'm happy to add this to my collection. I am also happy to tell you guys that this vlog is finally coming to an end, because this is a 5-star, my friends. I also think that this is a contender for my favorite book of the year. Currently, it is my favorite book of the year, but you know, we have 6 more months. So we'll see if that ends up, you know, holding true to the end of the year. But currently, this is definitely my top book. And I think this is doubly impressive because this is a debut author that I freaking love this. I thought it was amazing. And the ending, I'm not going to give you guys information, obviously, that would spoil the story for you, but I'll just say that I believe all of the questions that I had throughout, all of the little things that the author makes you think, and maybe he wasn't intending, I just was questioning certain things throughout the book, are answered at the very end. I really like how things wrap up. And I'm not always a reader that needs to have everything wrapped up. I like ambiguous endings, but in a book like this, I feel like I need some closure, and I needed to see how all the strings kind of tied together. And they do. They beautifully. I mean, it's just... The book I would compare this to is The Book That Wouldn't Burn from last year, which was my second favorite book of the year. In tone, how beautiful the writing was, and how the plot wove itself together. That's what I would compare it to as far as like the feelings that I had while I was reading this book. I also think that one of the things I've noticed is if a story intertwines grief and healing with their character's arc, like the main character's arc, if it's done well, which, I mean, I guess we can say that about a lot of things. If it's done well, we'll like it. But there have been some of my favorite stories that have kind of that sub story along with it. And just so you are aware, there is terminal illness in this story. It's not a big portion. Typically, I avoid terminal illness in any story. I don't like to read about it. It's not a trope I enjoy. However, I think that this author handled it really well, and I think that it does not come as a shock. It's very much, I don't want to say it holds your hand throughout the process, but you know what's coming, and well, you're blatantly told what is happening. And I'll say, because at the very beginning of the story, you do learn that the main character's grandfather has lung cancer, but her grandfather is not a main character in the story. And that's what I mean by it's not like a huge part of the book, but it does get addressed multiple times with her dealing with his loss, and her having to work through not only that trauma, but also some other things that happen in her story. And I thought it was really lovely how things wrapped up in the end for her and for everyone involved. So anyway, I will also say that this story has a trope in it that I absolutely hate, and I will not tell you which trope that is, but it is one that I complain about frequently, but I didn't mind it in this. And so I don't know if it's because I was just so swept away by the story that my brain didn't care, or if it was because I was able to piece together why it was important to happen that way. But anyway, I just kind of let it slide. So yeah, this is a 5-star read for me, which means that this is the end of this vlog. This is the end of this experience of reading until I get a 5-star. So I did do a part 1 to this video. I'm pretty sure I probably mentioned that in the intro to this video, but if I didn't, I will link it in the cards and down in the description so you guys can watch the first part where I didn't get a 5-star read. I read 4 books in that vlog. The books that I read in that vlog were Gog Magog, which I'm pretty sure I rated a 4-star, Night Film, which I rated a 4.75, Keeper of Enchanted Rooms, which was a 3-star, 3.25, 3.5, some type of a 3-star. And then the 4th book was Engines of Chaos, which I rated a 4.25. In this vlog, I have read a lot of books. I'm going to try and summarize them because I don't have all of them in my head. And I've had a lot of DNFs in this vlog. So I'm sorry for that, guys. But whether or not you find that entertaining, I guess we'll decipher whether or not we'll determine whether or not you actually enjoyed this vlog. But I started with Rabit Literature Society was on this vlog. That was a DNF. And I did read a lot of that, but it just didn't work out for me. The Book That Broke the World was a 4.75, so it was an almost. We also had Godkiller, which was a 4.25, but then we had 2 DNFs with Rakesfall and A Short Walk Through a Wide World. Those were both DNFs. Although I will say, those DNFs, I would prefer having that type of DNF to the Rabit Literature Society, because Rabit Literature Society, I only had 100 pages left until the end. I'd already read like 2/3 of that book. Whereas Rakesfall and, although Rakesfall I DNF'd at 15%, but A Short Walk Through a Wide World, I read almost 50% of that book. Not great. But then it makes it all worth it that I got a 5-star read and my favorite book of the year so far. So I am really pleased with this process. It's been a struggle. Yeah, I've been filming clips for this vlog since March 29th, and it is now July 5th. So it's taken me quite a bit of time to get to a 5-star that I've vlogged. I will say, just for transparency, and I've talked about this a little bit on some other videos on my channel, that I did have a reread that was a 5-star, the Liza Lachlamora, during this process, but I didn't think it was fair to vlog a reread for Read Until I Get a 5-star, so that's why that's not in this. And then I also read In the Labyrinth of Drakes, which was amazing, and it was a 5-star, but I just completely forgot to vlog it. So that could have actually ended my vlog early, but I ended up just not thinking about vlogging it, so I didn't get to count that either. So from March 29th until July 5th, I have only had 3 5-star reads. I've had several 4.75s, as you know. And so I am still enjoying some of the books I'm reading. I think I'm being a little stingier with my 5 stars. So with that, let me know if you enjoyed this process, if this is something you would like to see from me again. I'm not promising I will do it anytime soon, but it is something I would be willing to tackle again if you do like this content. If you all have gotten any 5 stars recently, leave them in the comments down below. I would love to know what you guys are reading and loving. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.